All right. No worries. All good.
Welcome to the Bucket List Life Podcast with Trav Bell, the world's #1 bucket list expert. Bucket List Life's mission is to help you get off the treadmill, stop Groundhog Days, hack your habits, and live a regret-free life. Because we know life's way too short not to live your bucket list life. So please welcome your host, Trav Bell, the Bucket List Guy.
Hey, bucket listers, welcome to another episode of the Bucket List Life podcast. I'm super stoked that you've tuned in, and you might be watching this on YouTube, you might be watching on Twitter, you might be watching on Facebook, you might be watching on LinkedIn, you might be watching a whole bunch of different places. You might not be watching it live, you might be watching it somewhere in the future. Who knows? It doesn't really matter, but thanks for tuning in to another episode. And I've been looking forward to doing this episode with our guest for a number of reasons, which will become apparent pretty quickly. But look, at the end of the day, this is going live and we are recording it for our podcast as well, again, to be downloaded a little bit later. So if you are tuning in right now, feel free to join into the conversation, whatever social media that you're on right now, whatever your drug of choice is. But tune into the conversation. Ask Morry, ask myself some questions if you've got any. Give us a thumbs up, give us a like, give us a share, give us a comment, and we'll go from there. All right, so our guest today is Morry Morgan, the founder of the School of Hard Knock Knocks. Yes, Morry, thanks a lot for joining us, mate. All right. Gotcha. There we go.
One of the oldest in Australia, South Melbourne. This pub is 1858, and I think the telephone lines is probably very similar. So I'm literally going to move closer to the NBN node.
Oh, there we go. Beautiful. This is the world we live in. This is real, guys. This is real. So we're yes, go get as close to the source of life as we know it, which is the internet. Mate, thanks a lot for jumping on. Whereabouts in the world are you? You're in South Melbourne, are you?
Yep, South Melbourne. I'm in an 1858 pub. You won't probably find an older pub in many. Yeah, that's the dare I give to your listeners. Try and find a pub that's older than 1858.
Wow, there you go. Is that where you do the comedy? Is that where you do the comedy school?
Yep, that's the School of Hard Knock Knocks. We are downstairs. I'm in the downstairs pub right now, and you can see behind me there is a white box that's totally too white, but that's the Elliot Goblet Bar. Downstairs Elliot Goblet Bar, and upstairs is our theaterette where we do all the comedy and produce shows and launch careers. Yeah. Well,
you've certainly had a hand in launching some careers over the years, mate. Thanks a lot for being on the podcast once again. And look, I wanted to get you on today because you are the founder of the School of Hard Knock Knocks. So, in short, helping people. It says on your website, and I quote, website says, for keynote speakers, yep, for bucket list tickers, yep, and comedians of the future. Don't know about that one, but I was going to sort of, maybe if you ask me, but if you're in front of it, mate, doing stand-up comedy scares the shit out of me, as it does for a lot of people. I've got no worries standing up in front of 1,000 people and making a fool of myself in my own. But this is all about my journey here because I'm about to do your course, but this is, people would rather. I mean, they say this about public speaking, right? People would rather be in the box than give the eulogy. I reckon it's even worse for stand-up comedy. Why are people so fearful of doing stand-up comedy?
Why are they so afraid? Look, I think some people there's an odd personality type that comes into wanting to be a stand-up comedian. That third type that you described, right? Number three, comedians of the future. They see the world through a different lens. They see it from a different angle. They do jokes which are so obvious to us as an audience member, because if they're not obvious, we don't laugh because we don't get them, right? So how is it that they create something from scratch, from zero, that's something that we can immediately understand and laugh at? Well, they see the world through a different lens. So they've got to be odd. By definition, they have to be strange. They have to be different. But for you though, on the other two, which was the keynote speaker and the bucket list ticker. So the keynote speaker, we're always told as keynote speakers, and I've given TEDx talks, and humor is one way of getting a message across. In fact, one of the best ways of getting a message across. So we get a lot of, probably a third of our participants, like yourself, are TEDx speakers, they're presentations, they're professional speakers, and they just want to add a little bit of twist, a little bit of jokes, because they're very good at saying something funny. They're just not very good at structuring that funny. So that they know for sure that they can repeat that and it will work every time. And I'm sure you've got a couple in there that you always use. You go back to, you fall back to.
The default, which has been really awkward lately, because we're right in the middle of COVID right now, and lockdowns, and we've been doing a lot of virtual presentations. And so the interesting thing about having 300, 500 people on a Zoom presentation, and you're doing your thing, and they're all on mute, and you're like, I normally always get laughs from the audience on this one, and so you deliver your line, and it's fucking crickets, and even worse is that you finish your presentation and you're normally signing books and you're hugging it out with people, and they might have been impacted by the message, and they just say, okay, the host says, okay, thanks a lot, next speaker, and just delete you and you're at home going, I guess I'll go upstairs and get a coffee then, right?
Right.
Can anyone be funny? Do you think everyone's got it in them to be funny?
Well, I think you're asking me two different questions. You're asking me, because we teach stand-up comedy. Stand-up comedy is like guitar. So you're asking me, can everyone sing in tune versus can you play the guitar? Now, that's a common one. They say, oh, but you can't. Not everyone's funny, right? Not everyone's hilarious. Look, stand-up comedy is the most rehearsed form of art out there.
Right.
A comedian like your Dave Hugheses, for example, your Matt O'Kine's, Ursula Carlson's, when they perform stand-up comedy, they've said that joke probably more than 10 times, possibly closer to 100 times. So they know the tonal inflection, they know the right word. They've moved the word, say, orange, and they've swapped it over with the word banana, because that got more of a reaction. In theory, yes, you can teach anyone to do stand-up comedy, because you can structure, even someone who has no concept of empathy and can't read an audience can act, and repeat. Can they write their own jokes from scratch? Can they modify? Can they work under pressure? Can they adjust their entire set for a change in the audience? That's another question. And so many of the best comedians in the world are introverts. They're not people who, like Elliot Goblet, like I mentioned, Jack Levi. Jack Levi is an introvert. Would you believe I'm in a pub right now and the kegs are being delivered? Now, we're in Australia, so you're delivery of kegs.
It's a barrel of beer. It's a barrel of beer.
Barrel of beer. Talk amongst yourselves.
Okay, cool. This is live, folks. So we're currently getting kegs of beer delivered
I'm
in the middle of a podcast.
So come on in, mate. Just bring him in.
Definitely. Bring the guy in. Bring the guy in, mate. Like crack the keg.
Free ad for
there you go.
We're in lockdown.
Awesome.
We're in lockdown in Melbourne, of course, and so I'm in the premise doing all the renovations, all the ordering. Everything's happening at once. The phone's ringing, new lines are coming in. Anyway,
Mate, that's not the old Star and Garter Hotel, is it?
The Star and Garter is down the road, probably maybe a kilometre. I think it's on Dorcas Street. We're on Park Street, Park and Morry.
Yes. But from memory, a bloke by the name of Andrew, I think, used to run that, or my ex used to work there, and that was when Dave O'Neill, Dave Hughes, Merrick was starting off, and that back in the day, I remember going to those on a Thursday night. It was amazing. Yeah,
Rove McManus started there. So South Melbourne is a real hotbed, or was, of comedy, and that's what we're trying to do with the Rubber Chicken, which is where we are right now, which is a bit bigger than the Star and Garter. Yeah. Mate,
so what makes a great stand-up comedian in your view?
Look, there's a number of non-comedy related factors. One is you're a nice person. You're not an asshole. I meet people all the time that come in as we call them open micers. They've started their comedy career, and you just walk away going, "Oh my God, cringe!" Like, how arrogant are you? How self-indulgent are you off the stage? I mean, you can be that on stage. That's fine. That's a character. That's you're trying to make us laugh. That's the only thing you need to do. But off stage, dude, drop the attitude. And the nicest people, the people that I always book are the ones that text me afterwards and go, "Thanks for the gig. That was awesome." They're just, and I can name them, and I'll be like, they're the first people I get. So number one is you're nice off stage.
I'm just writing this down, mate. I'm just writing this down. Nice off stage. All right, check.
Yeah. Number two is you improve, you learn. I've been in the business, stand-up comedy business, as a producer for about 6 years now, 6.5, which isn't a lot of time. But I'm meeting people who have been in the business for a similar amount of time, and I'm seeing them do the same jokes, the same technique. They're not growing, they're not improving, they're not getting feedback. And they're not doing it because of one of two, possibly both reasons. One is they're not critical. They're not doing what I call a GBB, a good, bad, better. What was good about my set? What was bad about my set? And how can I make it better? They're not reviewing. They're not listening to themselves in the drive back home. They just do it. They think they're awesome, and that's it. And the other one is they don't have a group of friends around them who give them feedback. I had to. I pulled a couple of comedians aside one time in the pub, and I'd seen this young guy. I won't say his name, but he'd been doing stand up for a number of years, and his microphone was right on his chest. It wasn't near his mic, near his mouth at all. And I'd seen him 3 times at my own pub over about a week's window, because we're doing a lot of open mic when we first opened. And I pulled his 2 mates aside. I said, "That's your mate on stage, right?" He goes, yeah. I said, "Do you want to give him any feedback about his mic technique? Because I can't even hear what he's saying right now."
Yeah,
and then they said, "Oh, it's not in our place to give him feedback." I was like, "Well, mate, I don't know if that's you being selfish or you not understanding the role of a mate. But a role of a mate is absolutely to help your mate. And if he can't hold his mic to his chin, he's not going to get anywhere beyond an open mic room." So this is one very specific example. But as I said, be self-critical, GBB, good, bad, better, and have a group of people who are willing to give you feedback.
I'm afraid to invite anyone I know to mine when I do finally tick this off my bucket list, mate. Is it good to invite your mates or not?
Look, I know exactly how you feel. We have people all the time who, like you, don't invite someone and then regret it. They regret it because at the end of the night, we typically have about 60 to 100 people in the upstairs room, because there's 12 students. They each bring sort of 5 to 10 people each.
So is that how it works? Right. And we'll get into how the course runs. But so you do finish. What is really intense is you do finish with a live stand-up night at the end of the course. So this is not just
You're on a
learning
high.
all theory. It's like, dude, practice.
No, it's
And
you're learning was it fire? You're doing a fire walk essentially equivalent at the end of it. And if you don't have any friends, you don't have that automatic empathy in the audience. They go, oh my God, that's Trevor, and they'll laugh at you, whatever. So you've got to be a little bit better if you don't have any friends in the audience. But more importantly, at the end of the night, when everyone else is high-fiving and hugging their family members and friends, you're standing in the corner going,
awkward. Yeah.
Well, that was a great experience. Other people will just have to trust my opinion that I was really good.
Yeah. Hey, mate, you've been in the comedy game for how long?
Well, 2016. So what are we
16.
now? Yeah. Coming up 6 years. Yeah.
And so you've seen, and very well renowned in the comedy circles. Who's your favourite comedians and why? Beyond Australia, the entire world, there's so much comedy online, and thanks to Netflix, it's really, some of the most watched stuff on YouTube and Netflix now. Who do you rate as a good, and everyone's got their own, sure, but who do you rate as a good comedian and why?
Well, look, it's like music. You can have a particular song that's in your head this week, and then next week you've got something else. I love music, and I love Bo Burnham, who's an American. He's just turned 30, but he's been doing musical comedy. You can get his songs on iTunes. He's a very cynical. He's not afraid, but people these days come to me and they say, oh, comedy's changed because you can't do dark humor anymore. No, you can. You've just got to be better than the crap that's out there. And Bo Burnham is a good example of that. On the other end of the spectrum, there's someone like Jeff Green, who's one of the loveliest people, and I've met him, and he, in fact, lives in Melbourne. He's British, and he came over from the UK after a very successful career in comedy, both on stage and on radio and game shows, and he lives in Melbourne, and his comedy is very, very nice. It's very soft. I would say it's gold comedy. By gold comedy, I mean you can perform it at an RSL club. You can do it in a scout hall. You can do it at a wedding. Versus bronze, which can be very dirty or dark or specific for this football club or this particular group of individuals. He's great. So Bo Burnham on the musical comedy space, and Jeff Green here in Australia, great British comedian, writes amazing material, and he's someone that we can see because he's here.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. What now I know there are like categories of jokes and categories of comedians. Can you give us some outlines on what they are? Because it's really interesting how you, from what I know anyway, from how you've broken it down in the course. You've got classic dad jokes to knock knock who's there's kind of jokes, and then you've got other kind of conversational things to Seinfeld observational. What are the kinds of categories and maybe categories of comedians and jokes?
Yeah. Well, the one key, and this is probably more important for the older men in this listening to this, is that telling a story about three people walking to a bar or a knock joke, that's not stand-up comedy. Stand-up comedy mostly it's a story about yourself and how you're involved in the story. So I was at a pub last week with my mate who's Irish versus an Irishman, an Englishman, and an Australian walking to a bar, right?
Yeah, right.
Occasionally on day one of the course, which is a 5-day course, we get an older bloke go up and start doing old, wife jokes. My wife's so fat, or Irish type jokes, that kind of thing. And we're like, no. You can still get that story out, but you just have to change the focal point. The subject is now you, not a third party. But in some cases, you can be on a tram, for example. I was on a tram and there was this guy talking to his girlfriend, but it's still a story that you're involved in. That's what stand-up typically is,
Love it.
unless it's comedy songwriting, and that's a different genre as well. But we don't teach knock jokes. Ironically, given our name, the School of Hard Knock Knocks, knock who's there, we don't teach that.
Okay, cool. In terms of a person looking at doing stand-up comedy, how do you know what it that you've got what it takes to? For me, look, let's be really blunt here. I want to be good at this, and I'm quite determined to be good at this. How do you know if you've got what it takes? Is it the amount of hours on stage? Is it the it just test and measure as much as you possibly can? How do you know? Have you ever told someone, "Nah, mate, no, I know that you've got this career of being the next Kevin Hart, but dude, when do you tell a person to pull the pin?"
Oh yeah, we often get like I said, people get in who want to be comedians. They're odd. I mean, I love odd people. I don't want to meet a world of accountants. We need to have a world that's strange. I pulled people aside before and I've said, look, everything that you just said there was so offensive, and you wouldn't get another gig. I know you think it's funny, but and I honestly think that some people lack. They're on a spectrum where empathy is one end and they're on the other. God. You can't do that. And I've had one guy in particular. I had to really be tough with him and say, look, that is it's not going to work in stand up. And he's pulled it back and he's realised, and he's great. Like I said, either you can adjust GBB or someone else tells you. Well, he was lucky to have both. But thankfully, he just didn't go into open mic and start throwing out what he was, saying. So be really good at it isn't going to happen on day one. We will see things like we do get a lot of keynote speakers who come in and there's a bit of bravado and a little bit of too much confidence occasionally because they know. And I've had a few people say, "Oh, I've got a bunch of friends."
By the way, I've got a bunch of friends. This is because we had a conversation. Would have been 2 years ago now. That we did a workshop for the Professional Speakers Australia and got one of you guys over there in Adelaide to help us out. He did an amazing workshop for all of our keynote speakers, and I know a lot of our speakers within the Professional Speakers Australia went and signed up for a School of Hard Knock Knocks. Russell Pearson, who was the then president, Louise Mayer, who was also a well-renowned keynote speaker. And a bunch of other people that I know have done the course and absolutely love it. So it'd be interesting to give that sort of feedback. And I reckon if you go in like a TED Talk, if you go in and do your shtick, and you got to really change it up. Is it about self-deprecating? Where does self-deprecating come into this?
Look, it can be. It can be. We're Australians. We don't like to see someone up on stage being too arrogant. The tall poppy syndrome. You certainly don't have to, but you don't even have to talk about yourself. Matt O'Kine is a great comedian. Grew up in Brisbane, lives in Sydney. He's on radio. He's on TV. He's great now. He did very well in Raw Comedy, one of the national competitions. And he does a lot of political conversations, or he talks about topics. So one of the best things he's ever talked about, I love, is talking about Australia Day and which day it should be. And he starts it off by talking about Easter. Like, which day is Easter on? What's the date of it? And of course, no one can say. Isn't it the second week of April or whatever, the first Tuesday of the high moon or something? That's his point, right? And of course, he tells a joke about it. So you don't have to be self-deprecating at all. You can be political. You can be talking about the times. You can be talking about how your cat died. That's all good. You can throw in a bit of self-deprecation at times to build empathy and to come across as not too, sitting on your high horse and and other metaphors.
Yeah.
But it's not a necessity. There are characters out there that are kind of pathetic in the way that they perform, and you feel attracted to them because of you want to hug them. Yeah, but no, like Leno and Woodley is a good example. Woodley is that lanky, dorky character, and we love that as an example.
Yeah. I love the different comedians. Really be yourself and don't take yourself too seriously. What is the so School of Hard Knock Knocks? Take me through the days of the course. What do you cover? Because I really do encourage anyone who's listening and watching this right now, check it out, School of Hard Knock Knocks, and I'll just put up there it is, schoolofhardknockknocks.com. Mate, tell us about the course.
Yeah, so it's a lot of experts that are coming at you. So it starts. It's 5 days in total. The first day is Sunday, 6:30. You turn up. You don't know anyone. We do one of those circles where everyone's looking at each other. Why are you here? What's your background? And it's quite confronting. And we say at the end of this 5 days, these people are in this circle are going to be some of your best friends. And they go, yeah, sure. But just like any type of crisis or horrible experience, they do.
Just like AA.
It's like AA
getting together on Sunday.
And a Vietnam War experience. It's like, oh my God, we survived. So Sunday's a bit of getting to know, a bit of joke structure. So we talk about the normal twist, for example. We talk about nonsense in all seriousness. We talk about how jokes, the last word of a sentence is, we call this the keystone. In a bridge, they've got that triangular stone that holds the bridge up. If you move that keystone from the middle to the end, you'll change the joke completely, and you'll turn a sentence into a joke, in fact, by making sure the last word is that keystone. That's what we do on Sundays. Then Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, we're writing material from scratch, but we've also got guest comedians coming in. So, for example, in August, we've got Limo, the stand-up comedian, actor, radio host. He comes in on the Monday, talks about his life. We can give some Q&A, and then he'll watch the students do their comedy. Then on the Tuesday, we then do again, we're still more writing, more techniques. We're learning about body language, volume, tone, speed, and pauses. And we're also got another guest comedian, and this person is an alumni or a graduate of the school who has gone off after graduating and has done the open mic circuit, has performed at Raw Comedy, has the feelers out there, and is a great first person to know, so that once they do graduate themselves, they've got someone that they recognize at the open mic room, and they go, hey, remember you came and spoke? Immediately you have a friend. Then good. Yeah, then Wednesday in particular, we do headshots and body shots, because as a comedian, you need to have photos to be put on posters. A lot of comedians don't have very high-res photos, so we put them out. And then Thursday is the big one. Thursday, they graduate in a room of 60 to 120 people. The biggest was 120. They'll do 5 minutes of their own material. This is jokes they wrote, that they perform, and that they're getting laughs for. That runs, there's typically, say, 12, so 6 and 6, and the final show is the headliner. So Limo will perform as the headliner. So if you've come to see Trav Bell, for example, you might also get to see, you get Limo, you get Chris Franklin, or you get Elliot Goblet. Yeah, we've had big names. And then you're a graduate. And once you're a graduate, then you're welcome back to the Rubber Chicken in South Melbourne, and we get you up on stage and we start paying you to perform. Yeah, so that's the.
But you've got to be at a certain level, yeah.
Yep, that's right. Yeah. So
you got to get some laughs.
I'm just going off camera for a second. So like that's the August course. There's Limo in the middle. And over here, this is Lisa Gattenby, and she graduated from the school, and now she's getting paid to perform with Limo. Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. I love that just leg into the industry, mate. That's so cool. So on that, tell me about some success stories from the School of Hard Knocks.
Yeah, there's two in particular pretty proud of. One is Gavin Semple. Gavin was one of our very first students, and he, I think he was just turned 18, and he was using, his jokes were pretty ordinary, and I'm pretty sure he'll agree they were pretty ordinary. He had great coaches. He had Chris Franklin and Brad Oakes. These are two veteran comedians.
Oh yeah, I know those guys. Yeah,
that's right. And they got him right in 5 days, and he started doing open mics. 3 years later, 300 open mic gigs to the day. He came second at Raw Comedy in Melbourne at the national competition at the Melbourne Town Hall. So I'm not suggesting that we were the cause of that. He's a hard worker, but very proud of him, and we invited him back many times to perform and get more stage time.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah. Matt O'Neill is another one. Matt O'Neill is a darker, edgier comedian.
Yeah.
He's a bit of a nonsense and all seriousness comedian, whereas Gavin talks about his life quite accurately, and his life is quite comical. Matt O'Kine uses nonsense in a lot of his stand-up, and he was invited to support. Invited to support Steve Hughes, who's a huge comedian, particularly in the UK and Europe. So that was a massive draw card, and I see Matt going on and being a very big comedian here in Australia very soon, once we're allowed to do comedy again.
Yeah. So how does the raw comedy thing work? You know, how do you win raw comedy? What's the criteria?
How do you win?
Look, well, how do you? Because I thought it was just a thing, and you get up, but they actually have a winner, do they? Or
yeah,
not?
they do. They have heats.
They do.
Yeah, Melbourne and Sydney is the hardest to win because you've got heats and semi-finals before you got the final. If you're in Tassie, Northern Territory, and Adelaide, possibly Perth, there's only one competition which goes straight into the final for the state. So you've got the South Australian state, WA, of course, Victoria. If you win your heats, you go into either the semi-final or the final, depending on which state you're in. And then the grand final is at the end of the Melbourne International Comedy Festival, which is typically in April. Look, it's harder to win these days than ever before. There's certainly I'm not suggesting that people who do well aren't as funny as other people, but it is so subjective. You know, you've got a panel of 3 judges at each of those heats and each of those semi-finals, and whatever, you know, what you laugh at and what I laugh at could be completely different. So you do generally, but you do get a mix of comedians on the graduation, you know, a mixture of genders and ethnic backgrounds and sexual backgrounds as well, which is great for comedy, and we're a big fan of variety. But it does make it a little bit harder for a person like yourself, Trav. I'm just saying, sort of a man, Caucasian, middle age, to win raw comedy. I wouldn't put my money on you. Sorry, mate.
Oh, mate, I wouldn't put my money anywhere near me, to be honest. You know what? I love these insights, buddy, and here's a quick story. One is I used to run this event called the Bucket List Experience. It was a personal development experience, you know, personal development, 3.5 day, you know, I guess retreat. And we used to run it there in Melbourne. And part of that is getting people to commit to bucket list items. So I get them to leave the room. We do an hour and a half, kind of, you know, 4 times a day, and in between the breaks, I'd get them to commit to bucket list items, you know, literally commit. And people would be, you know, calling people to make things happen. They'd be booking themselves into marathons. They'd be, you know, skydiving, all this sort of thing. And there was this one guy, Stephen, his name was. He was a Qantas airline pilot. He was dragged to my event by his mate. And Stephen, a very engineering type guy, you know, and was quite quiet. And he sat in the back of the room, and he really didn't do much for the, you know, for my course. And sort of at the end, I said, Stephen, you got to commit, mate. You got to do something. So you leave here with a, rolling bucket list, so to speak. He's like, all right. So he's left the room. They had a break, had a coffee, came back in the afternoon. And about 10 minutes later, Stephen came back in. It was about 50 people in the room. And I go, Stephen, like in front of everyone, Stephen, you don't look well, mate. He goes, what the fuck did you just make me do? And I went, dude, what? Mate, you really don't look well. You need to sit down. And he goes, what did you make me do? I said, mate, Stephen, and now he's got everyone's attention. So what did you do? What happened? And he's gone, I've just booked myself in the break. I just booked myself into an open mic stand-up comedy night. And everyone collectively went, oh, shit. You're really not that funny, under their breath. And and Stephen goes, no, mate, it gets worse. Mate, how could it get worse than that? That is ballsy. He goes, look, what I did is I went onto Facebook and told everyone when it was going to be and where. And we've all gone, oh, that's like hardcore, dude. Like, that is terrifying. Anyway, long story short, he did it. A friend of his in the audience filmed him. He was super funny. He talked about being a pilot. He did it again. He was even funnier. He sent me the footage. Absolutely hilarious. The most important part of this is the fact that was the thing. That stand-up comedy gig and pushing him to get it done was the thing, the big domino that he obviously had to push over in his life, because from there he got out of a toxic relationship with a girl that he was with at the time and had been with for quite some time. He had the balls to then go and ask this girl out on a date, and she actually said yes, and he'd been afraid to talk to her, for ages. And he actually started a property business with his brother, and they've been talking about this thing for years and years as well. So it was the stand-up comedy bucket list. It really goes hand in glove, I think, of facing your fears and doing it anyway, because we really don't know what's on the other side of this thing called stand-up comedy, or to a wider perspective, bucket list items. There's a person on the other side that you don't know yet, so who knows? So, mate, Morry, real quick, mate, I ask all of my guests this last question all the time. Imagine there's a big stadium full of people, and and you've been in this situation before anyway, but there's a big raised stage and a big booming microphone up the front. Mate, what would you like to say, and who do you choose to be in the audience?
Probably a bunch of entrepreneurs who I call 50 percenters. 50 percenters means they've told you what they want to do, but they haven't taken that first step because they're afraid.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
That's it. So just look, step one, right? Getting from 0 to 1 is the hardest thing you can ever do.
Yeah. And that is seriously, drop the mic right there. Morry, mate, thanks so much for being on the Bucket List Live podcast. Guys, there is the address. If you can't see it, it says the www.schoolofhardknockknocks.com. It is a really cool site. Whoever does your site, mate, it's amazing. Are you the genius behind that site? Because it's you got one help.
Yeah, I do. Good. I do it. Logo was developed by my wife, as she's an artist as well, and she did the rubber chicken. She designed that logo as well. So yeah, I'm very lucky to have a designer.
Very cool, guys. School of Hard Knock Knocks. There it is. Morry, mate, thanks a lot. We'll be meeting hopefully in face to face very soon when all this dies down. But guys, Morry, thanks heaps, mate. Once again, also guys, if you are tuning in, if you watch this, remember to subscribe on our YouTube channel, Trav Bell the Bucket List Guy on YouTube. Like and share, and please comment. We love your comments as well. Some of the comments so far on the Bucket List Live podcast have been absolutely hilarious and also really insightful. And let us know what you'd like and who you'd like to see on the Bucket List Life podcast. So, Morry, thanks once again, buddy. And we'll see you next time, Bucket Listers. Cheers.
Thanks so much for listening to the Bucket List Life podcast with the world's #1 bucket list expert, Trav Bell. For more great content, go to www.thebucketlistguy.com.